So introduction to DDP. Trunk negotiation is managed by the Dynamic Trunking Protocol or DTP. DTP is a Cisco proprietary protocol. It automatically enabled on Catalyst 2960 and Catalyst 3560 series switches. Also to enable trunking from Cisco switch to a device that does not support DTP, use the switch port mode trunk and switch port negotiate. So in negotiated interfaces mode, there are different tracking modes. First is the switch port mode access. Interface between a non-trunk interface. Switch port mode dynamic auto. This one interface becomes a trunk if the neighboring interface is set to trunk or desirable mode. Switch port mode dynamic desirable. This one interface becomes a trunk if the neighboring interface is set to trunk, desirable, or dynamic auto mode. Switch port mode trunk interface becomes a trunk even if the neighboring interface is not a trunk interface. And lastly, switch port non-negotiate prevents the interface from generating BTP frames. In negotiated interface modes, configure trunk links statistically whenever possible. You can use show DP interface to command to verify DTP. So in deleting VLANs from the switch, that is VTP server mode removes the VLAN from all switches in the VTP domain. You cannot delete the default VLANs, which is VLAN 1, 100, 1002 to 1005. Use the no VLAN ID global configuration mode command to delete a VLAN. Switch port issues. When using the legacy routing mode for inter-VLAN routing, the switch port connected to the router interface must be configured with the correct VLANs. S1 FO-4/4 is the default VLAN and this must be in access mode VLAN 10. Some of the switch port issues is when using the router on a stick routing model, the interface on the routing connected to the router must be configured as a trunk port. Also, interface F0/5 on switch 1, S1 is not configured as a trunk and is left in the default VLAN for the part. So in verifying the configuration, switch verification, you can use command show interface, interface ID switch port, or show running config. Interface issues, this happens when enabling inter-VLAN routing on a router. One of the most common configuration error is to connect the physical router interface to the wrong switch port. Verifying routing configuration, this happens with router on stick configuration. A common problem is assigning the wrong VLAN ID to the sub-interface. Use the show interface and show running config commands to verify the routing configurations. Error with IP addresses and subnets. For inter-VLAN routing to operate, a router must be connected to all VLANs. It is either by separate physical interfaces or by sub-interfaces. Also, each interface or sub-interface must be assigned an IP addresses that corresponds to the subnet to which it is connected. Also, each PC must configure with IP address within the VLAN it is assigned to. Verifying IP address and subnet mask configuration issues, the common error is incorrectly configured an IP address for a sub-interface. You can use show run and show IP interface to verify the IP addressing. Another error is incorrectly addressing the end device. You can use the IP config to verify the address on a Windows PC. So to troubleshoot BTP issues, the common problems with BTPs is incompatible BTP versions, BTP password issues, incorrect BTP domain, all switches set to client mode, incorrect configuration, division number. So troubleshoot DPT issues. The DPT components are trunk mode mismatches. This means configuration error causes the trunk link to stop working. Allowed VLANs on trunks. This list is of allowed VLANs on trunk has not been updated with the current VLAN trunking requirements. Native VLAN mismatch. This do not match. So the switches will generate informational messages letting you know of the problem. So introduction to layer 3 switching. Multi-layer switches provides high packet processing rates using hardware-based switching. Catalyst multi-layer supports in the following types of layer 3. This is routed port, which is a layer 3 interface, and a switch virtual interface of SVI. This is a visual interface for inter-VLAN routing. Remember, all layer 3 Cisco Catalyst switches supports routing protocols, but some several models require enhanced software for specific routing protocol features. Also, Catalyst 2960 series switches running iOS 12.2 or 55 or later support static routing. Inter-VLAN routing with switch virtual interfaces. In the early days of switch network, switching was fast and routing was slow. Therefore, layer 2 switches portion was extended as much as possible. So now routing can be performed at wire speed and is performed at both distribution or core layers. Distribution switches are configured as layer 3 gateways using switches virtual interface SVIs or routed parts. Routed ports are usually implemented between distribution layer. So inter-VLAN routing with switch virtual interface. So an SVI is a virtual interface that is configured within a multi-layer switch to provide a gateway for a VLAN so that the traffic can be routed into or out of the VLAN. Also to provide layer 3 IP connectivity to the switch and to support routing protocol and bridging configurations. Advantages of SVIs, it is faster than a router on stick. No need for external links from the switch to the router or for routing. So inter-VLAN routing with routed ports. A routed port is a physical port that acts similarly to an interface on a router. It is not associated with a particular VLAN and does not support sub-interfaces. Remember, routed ports are primarily configured between switches in the core and the distribution later or layer and use the no switch port interface command on this appropriate port to configure a routed port. Take note that routed ports are not supported on Catalyst 2960 series switches. Layer 3 switches configuration issues. To troubleshoot layer 3 switching issues, check the following: VLANs, SVIs, routing, and hosts. For VLANs, verify correct configuration. SVI, verify correct IP, subnet mask, and VLAN number. For routing, verify that either static or dynamic routing is correctly configured and enabled. And for the host, verify correct IP, subnet mask, and default gateway. So in troubleshooting layer 3 switching, we have 4 steps.